film industry in terms of the revenue, in terms of engagement. And today we are happy to have with us Liz Canner, who is a filmmaker, founder and director of Astria Media, Inc., a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating media projects. And she's showcasing her latest project, The Lost City of Mare. I don't know how many of you managed to see it or experience it. It was here on Monday morning in the SDG Action Zone. I did. Thank you, Liz. She brought it to us at the UN, and I experienced it. And I think it's something that you really want to try it yourself. It's immersive cross-platform VR and mobile app is being developed. It aims to reduce carbon footprint in the real world. And how do we, in the game, I won't go into details, I'll leave that to Liz, but you will hear, we have a short film also to show you what that film is about. We also have with us Winslow Porter, who is the Brooklyn-based director, producer, and creative technologist specializing in virtual reality, large-scale immersive installations. He's the co-founder of New Reality Company, which is a creative studio dedicated to synthesizing storytelling, art, and technology into emotional experiences. He's here today to talk about his virtual reality project, which transforms you into a rainforest tree. And there is one, you can actually experience it because it is behind you there. Don't do it now, because now you want to pay attention and listen to us. So we'll start with Winslow, because I know that the film lineup is the tree first. So Winslow, tell us the genesis of your project, and how do you think when people go through this, it will relate and change the way they see the issues related to forests, deforestation, and sustainability?
Sure thing. Also, thank you for having me. For Tree, we really wanted to be able to use virtual reality. I guess as a show of hands, how many people in this room have tried virtual reality? So it's a pretty good number. 3 years ago, there might be just a few hands that were raised. And we're seeing that with these new immersive forms of media, whether it's virtual reality or augmented reality, where you can add a layer onto what you're seeing through a phone or through a headset, we're seeing that it has the ability to shift your perspective. No longer are you just looking at something from a passive view, but you can become the protagonist. You can enter the world, you can transport your eyes and your ears with the technology, and with our experience, there's also smell, heat, wind, and vibration. So those are senses that we're used to. Those are things that we trust. Those are ways in which we're used to navigating our world. And if we can put you in place of a person or of a tree, then you're better at understanding the plight of that. Whether it's a being or a human, whatever that story is, VR has a really interesting ability to shift perspective. Mm-hmm. So then climate change, or say notifications about the Amazon being on fire, coming up to you from a BBC News app, we can flick those away, and those really, we're sort of divorced from the reality that's outside of our own. But if we're able to embody that firsthand, it becomes more personal. We're able to see it through, a different set of eyes, and if soon as something becomes more personal, we're no longer just intellectualizing it, we're feeling it, and that really can give way to a profound, shift in impact. So these tools are VR has only been around in its current state for about 4.5 years. So we're seeing that these tools are getting even more advanced. They're getting cheaper, faster, easier to use, and more part of the culture. So we're seeing that there's a lot that can be done with them. And this is just one example, and this is just the beginning.
But just to come back to it, it's not really a game, because it's an experience. And how do you think will people go back to do it? Because I did it, and it was an amazing experience. I really felt like a tree. But do I want to go back and do it again, unlike in a game where you score? So what's the motivation? Is it a one-time only? How do you?
Well, so we also want to make a multiplayer version so that we can have a lot of people experience it together, so that then they have a talking point. As soon as someone else is on the other side, there's a connection that can be made, and it can be even more powerful. But yeah, we tell people that we're actually using the same video game engine that was used to create Fortnite, which is and you use Unreal Engine as well. It's a really powerful tool. It's free, which is also incredible for people who are interested in making their own narratives, their own immersive stories. But the game that's used is Fortnite. It's the same software, but that's cartoon violence that's played by, I believe, over 100 million, mostly kids all over the world. But I think that this is a unique opportunity for people to take those tools and be able to use them. You know, they have, it's just another canvas. So whether it's a video game with you know, a community behind it where you're scoring high points, or it's a linear narrative where you're sitting down and there's no interactivity, it's just like, you know, a canvas for exploring, you know, an infinite amount of narratives. So for us, we want people to go back and explore it again, but we also want them to use this as a reason to try other content as well, once they see its transformative nature.
And can we have the video of the game, of the experience?
Ooh, good bass.
Wow. So Liz, tell us about the Lost City of Mer.
So the Lost City of Mer is this underwater magical civilization that was decimated by climate change. And you are the first mer baby to be born in decades, and you arrive in this cave and learn that your species has gone extinct, and you are charged with bringing them back to life. And I started making it because I'm a big snorkeler and I traveled all over the world, and I saw how the reefs have been dying everywhere.
Can you speak closer?
Oh yeah. How the reefs have been dying, and I was very concerned about that. And I'm a documentary filmmaker, and normally what I would do is make a documentary, but there's been a lot of films on climate change and what's happening with the oceans. So I got really interested in VR because, as Winslow said, we're in a new stage with VR. It's been around for about 30 years. And there's been a lot of research done on it that shows how it's something that actually replaces what we see as reality, and it's something that our brain perceives and processes it as something experiential. Whereas with what I normally did as a filmmaker, you're doing a narrative and you're telling a story, but your brain sees it in a different way. It recognizes it as a film, or if you're writing a story. And I think, you know, as Winslow was saying, these tools are very good for generating empathy. But what I was also interested in, since I come from linear storytelling, and if you tell your story well, you're going to generate empathy. I wanted to see how can we use these stories to actually do something that's iterative, that grows, that encourages action, that takes us beyond just empathy and allows you to actually reward people for doing good. So I wanted to teach about what was happening with the coral reefs, because they say by 2050, an estimated 90% of them will be gone if we don't actually do something. And so this project was really about taking these new technologies and trying to harness them for the way that they allow for this kind of world building and growing, so that it could be something people keep coming back to and are rewarded for doing actions in the real world.
And how do you make the connection when people play this game? Again, going to the same kind of question. How do you get repeat visitors, and is there going to be a version where you get people to play together and then they can, and the app, maybe more about the app?
Sure. So right now we've just finished chapter 1, pretty much, which is basically an introduction into the world. And the wonderful thing about world building is it's something that can keep growing. And so in chapter 2, that's what it's going to be. It's where the user really creates that world and creates beautiful coral gardens, as you did, and tries to bring the mermaids back to life, because that's the civilization that's been made extinct. And we've developed an app that we've just done the prototype of, that we're working on building out, that will basically encourage people to change their carbon footprint and encourage others to do as well. It's integrated into the game, and it rewards you for doing that, and you get to sort of create this whole underwater civilization with the app that you'll then be able to experience in VR as well.
Can we have the Lost City of Mare film?
Do you want to walk with me so we can get to 500 steps?
Yeah. Two more steps. 1, 2.
That's awesome.
Cool, huh?
Thank you. I think seeing it on a flat screen is one thing, but actually experiencing both, and I had the privilege of trying both, is completely different experience. Now, in our work for the last 5 years, 4 years, the SDGs have created an opportunity that others, industries and companies are coming and saying, how can we also be part of the problem? We saw that the Business Roundtable changed the definition of what the purpose of a corporation is. And a few years ago, the ad industry came together in what is called common ground, and saying, how can we help achieve the SDGs, and created the SDG Can Lion Award. Do you see any possibility that the gaming industry and gamers can also try to streamline the work they do for the SDG agenda, and maybe more than go beyond awareness to also strive to direct action and funding to restore coral, to build to forests?
Yeah, I think that each one of the 17 has very specific stories that we need to understand to connect to it. Just understanding the goals by themselves is one thing. It uses one part of our mind, but as humans, we crave story. We crave connection with others, and also bridging that gap of the human experience. So I think that VR could have a very profound impact on people's understanding of those, by understanding the families that are impacted by them, the animals as well, habitats that are affected. But it's one thing to see an image and see facts underneath, but being able to pull from our own experiences how do we share things in common with these narratives. I think that is something that is that can be definitely magnified by this immersive technology. But it's not to say that it's going to solve it, and it's not to say that it's easy to do. But if it's done right, immersive media, whether it's AR, VR, projection mapping, interactive sound installations, can really draw people in and can have a profound impact on the way they perceive things.
Mm-hmm. Liz?
Yeah, I think that one of the wonderful things about games and that whole world is how they use the imaginary and how they're so creative. And one of the things that I think the research has shown, Mary Flanagan's research, for instance, is that actually games that are dealing with zombies, or in our case, dealing with mermaids, are often more effective than games that are based on reality. She did a whole study that looked at Pox saved the people and Pox saved the zombies, and people felt more caring about the zombies. So this is sort of a way in which I think the gaming industry is perfectly set up to really harness that kind of world building that they do and game design to incorporate the SDGs. Mm-hmm. And I think Games for Change is a wonderful festival in New York that really tries to highlight those types of games. They are being created. There are NGOs also working on games like that. So I think there's definitely a lot of potential to pursue.
Yeah, coincidentally, so we both use Unreal Engine, and Tim Sweeney, who is the founder of that video game engine, he's also, I believe, the largest conservationist in North Carolina, too. If you look on his Wikipedia page now, it actually says conservationist.
Buying up land, I think.
Yeah, exactly. He's I think the second largest landowner in North Carolina, and it's all for conservation's sake. But also with Fortnite, the game that they created, it's not just a video game, it's a community. And it's a way for people to interact. It's how many kids spend, most of their waking hours, when they're not in school. So I think that if we're also able to use these communities, there's creative modes in them too. It's not just running around and shooting people. There's an ability for people to create using the same tools and making it easier for them. You don't need to be a coder. You don't need to be a designer. You can use the same tools that you would be to, say, grab a gun off the table to be able to grab a block and build a structure out of it, just like in Minecraft. So I think there are tools that we're seeing are going to be able to empower the youth or anybody who's really interested to tell these stories.
And I think that you're making a good point, and that is that really if there's going to be change, there has to be a whole community behind it. And one of the things that the games do is you can make a multi-user game using this game engine very easily. It's set up for it because it is the same as Fortnite. And that is going to be really, I think, instrumental in helping to push forward the SDGs.
Especially that this week and yesterday, I think the Secretary General launched the Decade of Action, delivering on the SDGs by 2030. So with that in mind, I think how can we create communities through the gaming industry? And maybe this could be a call to all gamers. Create the communities that will deliver the SDGs by 2030. So I think we are running out of time, but if you have a last thought that you want to share?
Yes, I mean, I think just with what you're saying, this is really a call to action. It's basically all hands on deck at this moment, especially around climate change, where we need all the creatives to get together and start making work that deals with the SDGs, really tackles climate change. And it's critical for basically, so that we don't go extinct along with the mermaids. That's kind of where we're at.
Thank you. Winslow?
I just think we're going to be seeing technology as not just something that has been creating these problems, but also as something that can be able to help better understand them and hopefully solve them as well. But it's a double-edged sword. It can go both ways, and I think it's really up to us to be the ones who are empowered by it and make the right decision.
Well, thank you both for being with us, and I think it's not forming yet, but I can see a line going to form to try the tree. Sorry the lost city of Mer is not here, but maybe we'll invite you back for colleagues to try it. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just over a year ago, Nazir Mai and her family were trapped in bonded labour. Homeless and desperate for shelter, they worked in exchange for a place to live.
Our landlord provided a place to stay, and in return, we would do household work and chores. My husband and son took care of his animals. The house was very old and made of mud. It was also up to him whether or not he would pay us wages.
For generations, many rural people have faced similar circumstances in the southern part of Punjab province in Pakistan, the poorest part of the country. While illegal, they have to work for their housing, often living in crude dwellings on their landlord's property. Most of them receive no wages to save or invest, keeping them in the cycle of poverty. The government of Pakistan classifies these people as ultra-poor, based on a survey called the Poverty Scorecard. Now, for the first time, a government project supported by the International Fund for Agricultural Development, or IFAD, is using the Poverty Scorecard to target Pakistan's ultra-poor to break the cycle of poverty.
The project is working for the ultra-poor having poverty scorecard 0 to 11 because they are assetless, they are landless and socially excluded.
Through the project, community organisations were formed to provide options for these socially excluded people to find a path out of poverty. Since landless women under the age of 35 are among the most marginalised, education and women's rights are key, according to social organiser Shazia Yazin, who leads this group.
We help women stand on their own 2 feet to be self-sufficient. Therefore, when we form a community organization, we talk to the women about the importance of education. We show them how to do more to educate their children, how to take better care of their health.
The community organisations are also a forum to discuss the needs of its members. Most women identify secure housing as their greatest need to free them from bonded labour. Hajira Bibi received a small housing unit through the project. Her family contributed to the construction and the land is registered in her name. For the first time, her family has running water and free solar electricity.
First, we are just happy we have a house, but also because we have a bathroom. It makes me happy because I have daughters. Sons can go outside to use the toilet, but for daughters, it can be dangerous. That's why we're thankful.
Since she no longer had to work in exchange for housing, Hajira was able to take part in entrepreneurship training provided by the project. With startup funds, she opened a small shop in the back of her home that sells sewing materials, jewellery and snacks.
I was doing general labor, as was my husband, but we did not feel like we were living a life with freedom. Now we are free.
While Hajira chose entrepreneurship training, members could also choose to learn a trade. Shamim and her husband chose to learn shoemaking. In order to help them build a successful business, the project brought in a professional business development officer to support them after they completed their trainings.
Even after completion the training, business development officer continuously follow up the trainees. So if they feel some hurdles in their businesses, we should tell them the other opportunities available in the market.
The business development officer advised his family to produce different types of shoes based on seasonal changes in the market. They were also provided with startup capital and advertising for their new business.
After our work was advertised, traders would visit and realize that we were well trained and we're doing quality work. As a result, we've received more orders and business is good.
In this area, poverty is high. People are very poor, but they have abilities. God has gifted everyone abilities. That's why there is a need for organizations like this to support them.
There are now 4,000 community organizations supporting tens of thousands of rural people. Free of bonded labor, they are able to pursue better economic opportunities, send their children to school, and escape the cycle that has kept their families in poverty for generations.
1, 2, 3, 4.
We are so happy to have this concert with UNCSR and also with El Sistema. We are in this orchestra for many countries. Syria, Afghanistan, Eritrea, Sweden, Albania, Venezuela, so many countries. And the most important is that we do music as a tool for social integration, for development. And we play with love, and that's what we want to give for you.
med barn och ungdomar i hela Sverige. Och just i Göteborg så arbetar de med flyktingbarn som nyligen har kommit till Sverige. Och UNHCR stödjer det här arbetet för UNHCR tror på musik som ett verktyg för integration.
Jag spelade aldrig instrument eller musik, jag sysslade aldrig med musik. Men här, när jag började att spela, alltså, jag kan säga mitt äldre tjej, alltså, jag visste aldrig att, hur mycket musik kan påverka mitt liv. Vi spelar i en grupp, vi tränar tillsammans, vi går utbildning tillsammans och vi är glada tillsammans, vi är ledsna tillsammans, vi känner oss som en familj.
Hello everyone, my name is Sergio Bardad, and I currently serve as lead of Global Graphics and Communications at the United Nations Postal Administration. It is my distinct pleasure to have worked on this issue of stamps for UNESCO's World Heritage Sites. For 2017, we are showcasing sites along the Silk Road. First, a brief background on UNESCO. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization seeks to encourage the identification, protection, and preservation of cultural and natural heritage sites around the world that are of outstanding value to humanity. The Silk Roads were an interconnected web of routes linking the ancient societies of Asia, the subcontinent, Central Asia, Western Asia, and the Near East. These contributed to the development of many of the world's great civilizations. These routes served principally to transfer raw materials, foodstuffs, and luxury goods. However, these vast networks carried more than just merchandise and precious commodities. The constant movement of peoples, merchants, and goods along these routes brought about the exchange of knowledge, ideas, cultures, and beliefs. this had a profound impact on the history and civilizations of the Eurasian peoples. The Silk Roads were listed as UNESCO World Cultural Heritage in 2014. We create each issue in 3 languages: English, French, and German. In addition, these issues are valued in 3 currencies: dollars, Swiss francs, and euros. We have created 6 stamps representing various sites along the Silk Road. Firstly, we've featured the Longmen Grottos in China and the Suleiman II Sacred Mountain in Kyrgyzstan. These are issued in English with a dollar value. They are followed by the historic center of Bukhara in Uzbekistan and the Kunya Urgench site in Turkmenistan. These are issued in French and have a Swiss franc value. We round off the set of 6 with the historic Tabriz complex in the Islamic Republic of Iran and the city of Safranbolu in Turkey. In designing these stamps, it was my intent to give proper homage to these incredible and beautiful places. I hope the collector comes away with an impression of the vast tapestry of color, texture, and spirit of these rich cultures. For more information on the sites along the Silk Road and how to purchase these postage stamps, and information on previous World Heritage sites we have showcased, please visit us at unstamps.org. Thank you.
Nelson Mandela's Day, 18 July, every year, the Department of Public Information and other UN offices around the world organize days where colleagues can go and contribute something to public service. Today, in collaboration with the Office of the Commissioner for International Organizations from the Mayor's Office in New York City, and we are here on Randall's Island to participate in cleaning the shore. We have the President General Assembly here, we have the Commissioner for International Organizations from the city, we have the President of Randall's Island Society, and over 60 staff from the UN, and many diplomats. The Ambassador of South Africa is here as well.
I would say Corona bottle tops, number 1. Number 2, I would say cigarette butts, filters, which of course don't degrade. They get down into the water, fish eat them, they end up in our guts. And the other big one is plastic straws, and funny enough, plastic straw wrappers.
And that's basically it, so it's score time now. Thank you. Thank you again, you guys. It was really excellent.
You can get support to achieve your organization's goals without barriers of time and place. All you need is a device, a connection, some time, and a task that can be done over the internet. Volunteers willing to share their skills and expertise are within easy reach. Sign up your organization today, and you can soon start involving online volunteers in your work. Tell us about yourself as the representative of your organization. Tell us what type of organization you represent, and take your time filling in all parts of the web form in detail, and upload supporting documents if asked to. By now, you will have received an email in your inbox with a link to activate your organization account and finish signing up. You can now submit your organization profile to the UNV Online Volunteering Service team for their review. If UNV approves your profile, you'll be able to create your first online volunteering opportunity. Take time to plan your involvement of online volunteers. What is your need? How can you break it down into tasks? What type of profiles are you looking for? The better prepared you are, the easier it will be to complete the web form and create an online opportunity that attracts the right volunteers quickly to meet your needs. There are screen tips and a good to know section to help you. In addition, the UNV Online Volunteering team is ready to provide guidance as needed. When you are happy with the opportunity you drafted, submit it to the UNV Online Volunteering Team for review. You will be notified when your opportunity is published and every time a new application arrives in your account. Review applications as soon as possible. As soon as you have enough, close the opportunity to stop receiving more. Quickly reject applications of volunteers you do not want to involve. It is good practice to inform them of your decision by email. Invite shortlisted applicants for a test, a short interview, or inform them that you selected them. You have selected one or more volunteers to work with you. Collaborating online should be an enjoyable and enriching experience for you and the volunteer. It is good practice to kick off the collaboration with a briefing message. A key ingredient for successful collaboration is clear, prompt, and appropriate communication. This is true up until the end when you and the volunteer are asked to give feedback to each other. When you and your volunteer have submitted your respective feedback forms, you can generate the certificate of appreciation for each volunteer to confirm and recognize their contribution to your organization's work. Good volunteer management is the best way to ensure a satisfactory experience for your volunteers and to show you have what it takes to change the world through online volunteering.
Hi, my name is Lillian Yip, and I'm an online volunteer for UNV. I live in Ipoh, a city that is near the north of Peninsula Malaysia. I've never been to Guatemala, and there's a good chance I might never get to go. But it's still very gratifying to know that that doesn't stop my work from helping somebody there. ADICTA is an association based in one of the poorest regions in Guatemala, and they aim to help small-time farmers sell their agricultural products. What they wanted to do was create literature to help promote both the importance of a healthy diet and of consuming local products. We quickly settled on the format and the type of promotional material which best suited their needs. One of the requirements was that the literature were to be photocopied and distributed during a local fair, which means the design has to look good in black and white. The solution was a trifold leaflet that can be printed out on an A4 paper and then photocopied to make as many copies as they want.
Y también los voluntarios Naciones Unidas, sí, ellos también nos han ayudado para ver de hacer algunos documentos que nos sirvan como la publicidad de nuestros productos. Un trifoliar en donde esté ahí, ¿verdad?, indicado cuáles son nuestros productos, ¿verdad?, cuáles, qué contiene cada uno de nuestros productos, cómo puede contribuir nuestros productos a mejorar las condiciones de la salud de nuestros asociados. Los voluntarios de Naciones Unidas nos han ayudado también a conectarnos con otras personas internacionalmente. Nos han ayudado para que nosotros contáramos con la página internet.
I had a great time working with ADICTA. It felt satisfying to be able to help in some small way. There are thousands of people like me all over the world who are volunteering their time and skills online through UNV. The ancient university town of Oxford is home to one of them.
I do online volunteering with a nonprofit organization called Respect University. And what we do is offer free post-secondary education courses to refugees and IDPs across the world. Volunteering overall was something I've always wanted to do, whether it was with the Peace Corps or UNV. However, with my circumstances, the online volunteering has been actually a little bit better. I've always been working, and I've never been able to actually go off for 6 months or a year. The online volunteering is very good because it's very flexible. We have 3 regions Respect University is working with, basically Uganda, Afghanistan, and Nepal. And we have many students who are taking these courses that we offer, the free post-secondary education courses, and we have many more students who want to take classes as well. None of this would be possible without the tutors. And who are the tutors? Well, basically, they are online volunteers. And all of these tutors I found were through the UNV online volunteering service site, and they have done a remarkable job. And again, without them, we would not even have Respect University or be able to offer free post-secondary education courses to war affected refugees and IDPs. Well, we have an organization called AWIC, Afghan Women's Educational Center. They're in Kabul, Afghanistan, and my contact works for the organization as like a director. And he was really happy, basically, for Respect University to offer these type of courses to some of their students, especially the female students. With Afghanistan, they do have access to internet through AWIC, which is very handy because they do have a resource center they can always use. Some of them are actually from Kabul, some of them come from outside provinces, more dangerous areas, and they're trying to get their education. They're getting access to education that they cannot get already. Also, they're getting a different perspective. And thirdly, actually, since a lot of them are young women, they're very eager for the knowledge, they're very eager to participate and share ideas. I've been told a couple times that they do get into groups, and they'll work on the assignments together. Maybe the only challenge would be, again, maybe the communication between me and the students. It is artificial at times, but that's something that we're also looking forward to, working out. Maybe do more like video conferencing, like through Skype or maybe the Gmail chat. They have that these days, and really have more of an interaction between the tutor as well as the students, and not always go through the ground coordinator liaison all the time. I think the work is important because, again, it's just bringing additional skills and knowledge to people who want them, who don't have access to them.
A wooden bridge over a small stream is all that separates South Sudan from Uganda here at Busia. But for those who make the crossing, it may as well be worlds away from the horrors that lie behind. The spot marks the end of a perilous journey for thousands of South Sudanese who've been fleeing brutal attacks on civilians. Children make up a large proportion of those fleeing the war, as parents, relatives and guardians urgently try to get them to safety.
First of all, we want to hurry up with the women because they are helpless. At least sometimes we can run. What about the women? plus kids like this, twins of that kind. Can you manage to run? You can't.
The trauma is written all over the faces of the stunned, disorientated children. The lucky ones arrive with piles of clothing and mattresses. Others were forced to flee with nothing. At the Berijangu border, exhausted families arrive after taking an alternative route through neighbouring DRC. Joyce Apai walked for 9 days with her 3 children, as well as 2 young girls separated from their parents. Like too many of the others who arrive, they're haunted by atrocities witnessed along the way. New arrivals gather at the transit centre where women attempt to feed the hungry and exhausted children with what little they have. Hundreds of people have only hot tents for shelter as they wait to be moved to collection points and onto various settlements. The toll that the journey has taken is plain to see.
Most of them look so tired because of walking so long distances. I think probably because there is no good feeding in the bushes when they were coming. They look malnourished when they come here. They're weak and the legs are swollen.
New arrivals are transported by bus to Kaluba collection point, where refugee status is verified before they're registered and processed. White wristbands for unaccompanied minors, yellow for the acutely malnourished. Moses Remo fled from Yei after his brother was killed and managed to escape with his family as well as his brother's 3 children. The grueling and dangerous journey was made mostly on foot.
On the way we were eating okra leaves. These are the things that made these children suffer these 2 days. Some of them is not having enough power for moving. That is why I will carry them on a wheel of bicycle and push them.
Belongings are piled into trucks as the families queue for a seat on the buses that will deliver them to their new lives in exile. For parents and guardians, the worst is over. Their children's lives are safe, and some grasp the chance to finally get some rest. But not everyone can sleep. Excitement builds as the new arrivals catch their first glimpse of the Mvepi refugee settlement and their fellow countrymen. At the reception centre, medical teams administer vaccinations before the families are processed and fed a hot meal. They may be out of danger, but life in a Ugandan refugee settlement comes with its own set of challenges for the displaced children.
Some of them come here thinking they cannot live anymore because they come with so many other problems. There is also the trauma of being displaced, a service delays. He cannot get food because the line is too long. And then he starts thinking, why don't I go back to Sudan? Because everything I want to get, it's hard. But then little by little, I know with time, especially with the psychosocial support, they keep on, healing.
If here, I think if they are not hearing any gunshot, they will come back to their normal, and if there is education, they could join.
But the children's mental health is only one among countless challenges Moses and his family will face as they join close to 1 million other South Sudanese trying to eke out a living as numbers swell and resources dwindle.
To the children whose birth water is broken by whizzing of shrapnel, this is our portion. We know war in sunken eyes. We know it in the jabbing hunger pains. We know it in our heavily blistered, callous feet. Home is living between 2 tectonic plates, deep orange skies that invite birds that squat, scrap, and scavenge. The blood has made it to the groundwater. We know the reeking smell of almost entirely well. We cannot hold it to our cracked lips, so we bite down on our children and our kin bleed. There is time to perish, but there is no time to mourn. There is time to rot, but there is no time to bury. Home is suspicion. Home is crouch face down on cement pavement. What is sanctum on unceded land? We say we have survived. and new chaos embraces us softly, quietly. The dead now do not motivate our fathers to get up from under the trees. They pour another cup. This is a bottomless tea. The dead now do not motivate our mothers to teach their sons substance. Our black skin hangs loose. Lather it with oil to keep it from running. Fear punches holes in the future. Fear cannot mend them. It siphons the chaos for later. Home always comes late to it all. Later always comes so soon. We cannot swing across oceans with these mangled roots. When war breaks, we run. We will not carry our language. War is raging behind clenched teeth. To fathers that sleep with guns in their hands but will never hold their children, legacy does not fill the gaps. You've turned our names to weights that crush our backs. You've turned our names into sinking sand. What are hunger pains to torn limbs? What is plumbing to broken spirits? What are roots if they choke you? We say home is so far. The same oceans are sitting between folks looking into each other's eyes. Our portion is silence. They imagine home is settled soot. They imagine country is running. We now know refuge is both.
For Sharifa, the way out of Sudan has been long and hard. She and her children lived in a camp for the forcibly displaced in the Darfur region. Growing insecurity and dwindling food aid sent them to Libya, where her husband disappeared to 2 years earlier. Her husband and safety were impossible to find in Libya, so they moved on. With handouts and charity, they've made it this far, to this desert outpost in Niger. Agadez has been a trading crossroads for centuries. These days, many thousands of people pass through it each year, heading northward into Libya and toward Europe beyond. Sharifa is part of a group of Sudanese who have gone in the other direction, running from dangers at home and in Libya.
Depuis le premier trimestre 2018, donc on a assisté vraiment à une arrivée massive des migrants, surtout de la frontière libyenne. Quand ils venaient de la Libye, vraiment c'était dans des situations vraiment très difficiles, sur le plan psychologique, sur le plan alimentaire, tout ça qui se suit.
UNHCR and its NGO partners are providing emergency assistance to the most vulnerable, like Sharifa. 3 of her 6 children were born with severe disabilities, but with what? She doesn't know. She was never able to take them to a doctor until now. Medical aid, food, shelter, life-saving help is at hand. But with more than 2,000 Sudanese newcomers, the centers are overcrowded, forcing people into makeshift sites and onto the street.
This is my room. I live here. And at night, I will sleep here outside here in this space. At the day, I will sleep here, share with my friend.
Mohammed shares this floor with 41 other men. Others, women and babies, families, have set up sleeping stands here in the street. All people in search of a future, all waiting for their stories to be heard and for their long flight to end.
It's complex and requires a careful examination, most likely case by case, which the government and UNHCR will do together starting next month. Meanwhile, for humanitarian reasons, and we've seen them in difficult conditions, we need to improve shelter, healthcare, sanitation. There were women, pregnant women that need urgent attention.
Sharifa's eldest daughter, Aman, is 17. She has had 4 years of schooling in her life. Here on the edge of the Sahara, she harbors one simple hope: to stop running, perhaps one day to study again.
Le désert est devenu une cimetière pour nos frères africains.
My father was not paying for me school fees. That's why I leave home to go to Libya or to go to Europe to have a good life, become a good boy so I can support the family behind.
Il y a eu beaucoup de morts dans le désert parce qu'il y a 1000 routes. Si maintenant le GPS là a trouvé un petit choc, tu es foutu. Tu ne peux pas retrouver la voie normale.
For now, if I stay home, I will not be serious. I will smoke, drink, so I don't want that life. I don't want to become a bad boy. But if I go Europe, I will continue my school. After I continue playing football again. There are a lot of dangerous things happening in Libya, fighting, killing. But me, I always already took my decision. Okay, God will save and guide me.
Well, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. I'm glad to see plenty of people here today, and I'm particularly delighted that the ambassador from Kenya, His Excellency Mr. Lazarus Ombayamayo, is with us, and the Deputy Permanent Representative from Ethiopia, Gebeyo Ganga Gaito. Thank you very much indeed for coming. And we think there may be one or two other colleagues from affected member states here as well. I'm also thrilled that we have Dominique Bourgeon with us, who's the Food and Agriculture Organisation's Director for Emergencies. I have been following this issue that we're going to be talking about today, the desert locust situation in the Greater Horn of Africa, and indeed in parts of South Asia, with great and, I have to say, ever-growing concern. Somalia and Ethiopia are experiencing the worst locust outbreak they've seen in 25 years. And in Kenya, this is the worst in generations, for 70 years, I understand. And we've just seen that swarms have crossed in the last 24 hours to Uganda, with Tanzania and South Sudan also on the watch list. Locusts, as you all know, are the oldest and most destructive migratory pests in the world. Their swarms can devastate crops and pastures remarkably quickly and remarkably thoroughly, and I know that Dominique will talk a bit more about this in a minute, but I want to just remind you of some of the truly staggering facts we all need to bear in mind as we get to grips with this challenge, and particularly to understand the magnitude of the challenge. So an average swarm of locusts, 1 kilometre square, that's 40 to 80 million locusts, can consume in a single day enough food to feed 35,000 people in one day. Meanwhile, one swarm in northeast Kenya was estimated to be as large as 2,400 kilometres square. So, if my calculator works, what that means is there would have been something like 1 to 200 billion individual locusts in that single swarm, and that they would be devouring enough food to feed 84 million people a day 84 million people a day. Locusts are not only hungry, they're also fast moving. A swarm can travel up to 150 kilometers in a single day. And locusts do not go through immigration or customs or have passports. They do not respect, obviously, international borders. So this is very much a major regional issue. And we're already seeing reports of significant crop and pasture damage throughout the region. And as we know, unfortunately, it will always be the most vulnerable people who will be the hardest hit. This, of course, is in the context of back-to-back shocks across the Greater Horn of Africa in recent years. We all remember how hard we had to work to fight off the threat of famine in Somalia and Sudan in 2017. But even today, something like 13 million people are in severe food insecurity in these three countries, most affected by the locusts. And if you add in South Sudan and Uganda to the at-risk group, there's 19 million people who are at severe risk of severe food insecurity. These communities over the last 2 years have weathered poor rains, drought, floods. Their resilience has been undermined, and many families, especially women and girls, have been driven to adopt extreme coping mechanisms. And by the way, it's these weather events I've just described which are creating the environment to facilitate the current locust outbreak. Unusually heavy rains and an increase in the frequency of cyclones in the Indian Ocean have created favorable conditions for the locusts to breed. Obviously, there are many humanitarian challenges we're facing across the world today, but we need to keep our eye on the particular needs in the Greater Horn of Africa. In Ethiopia and Somalia, there are more than 13 million people in need of humanitarian assistance before we deal with the current threat. And for our humanitarian response plans for those two countries, we're seeking $1 billion each to address the existing vulnerabilities this year. In northern Kenya, there are counties where children consistently suffer global acute malnutrition rates above 30%. That's more than twice the emergency threshold. Meanwhile, Uganda, which is hosting more than 1.3 million refugees, has, as I said earlier, just reported the arrival of the locusts. South Sudan, where there's 7.5 million people who need humanitarian assistance, is also at very high risk. And of course, across the whole region, there are millions of people who've been displaced, either refugees or internally displaced. My point is, in this region where there's so much suffering and so much vulnerability and fragility, we simply cannot afford another major shock. And that's why we need to act quickly. We do have a chance to nip this problem in the bud, but that's not what we're doing at the moment. We're running out of time. The rainy season starts in March. After that, it's going to be much more difficult to bring this infestation under control. So we need to act decisively now to mitigate the potential for more humanitarian suffering. Bearing in mind all these risks, I released $10 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund. I did that not because there is huge humanitarian suffering arising from locusts now, but in anticipation against a forecast that there would be if we don't act. And I did it also because I was hoping to catalyze other immediate funding, particularly support for FAO's $76 million appeal. Unfortunately, over the last 3 weeks, while lots of those who could respond have been looking at the issue, the decisions and the flow of funds we've seen have been quite modest, certainly not commensurate, we think, with the scale of the potential crisis we're facing. So one of the points I want to make today is the urgency of decision-making by those who want to provide assistance, the urgency also of scaled-up action in the affected countries, and a stronger collective effort and more visibility of mobilization of that effort. So that's my call today. I'm calling on the countries concerned, the international community, the donors to step up and to step up now. There is a risk of a catastrophe. Perhaps we can prevent it. We have an obligation to try. Unless we act now, we're unlikely to do so. Now, I've been working very closely with my colleague, the Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization on this, Chu Dong-yu, and we're now going to play you a message from him.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for not being able to join you today in person for this important briefing. The current desert locust upsurge poses an immediate threat to the livelihoods, food security, and nutrition of tens of millions of people in countries already Africa and those that are at risk. In the 5 countries that are battling desert locusts today, we are over 12 million people already experience acute food insecurity. A further 20 million people are on the verge. Without rapid action, we will be facing a rapidly expanding humanitarian crisis. The desert locust swarms have grown exponentially. Unless funding requirements are met now, they will continue to rise. FAO is asking for $76 million. Although this might increase in the coming weeks, it's needed now in February for our actions to have a full impact. We have already mobilized almost $20 million, but we need more. FAO is already on the ground, supporting government-led locust control operations, conducting rapid impact assessment, safeguarding livelihoods, and strengthening national capacities. I would like to highlight the swift contribution from the CERF of $10 million to FAO desert locust activities, and to thanks the Secretary General Mark Lowcock for the rapid release of funds. FAO has released $3.8 million, and a number of donor countries are pledging support, but we need action now. We have an opportunity now to avert a massive humanitarian disaster by controlling the locusts and protecting the livelihoods of the rural populations already on the front lines of this crisis. If we wait, if locust operations are not scaled up, if livelihoods are not protected, then we can guarantee you the entire humanitarian community will soon request more fundings and much more efforts. We are already on the ground and working together with governments and partners, but we need the donor support to avert immense humanitarian tragedies. Thank you.
Very good. So what we would like to do now is hear from 2 of the countries most affected currently. So I'm delighted, firstly, to give the floor to the permanent representative from Kenya. Ambassador, please, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Lowcock, USG, for giving me the floor. And jointly with FAO, we thank you for convening this important meeting to provide a briefing on the desert locust invasion, which for us in Kenya, we have not seen in the last 70 years. It was in late, I think, 1949 or 50 that they heard of locusts in this magnitude. but I don't want to preach to the converted. What we have now are two important appeals to you. One is on efforts to curb or control the spread of the invasion by locusts. As we were preparing for this briefing last week, we were talking of just about 15 counties, and we were coming to urge you to say, please stop it in Kenya, otherwise it will spread to Uganda and South Sudan. Little did we know that last night, the locusts already already reached Uganda and South Sudan, and so the spread would be even much, much higher than what we are talking about. Apart from curbing the spread, we also appeal to you, and thanks to FAO and OCHA, for assistance or aiding those already affected. And in this regard, I wish to highlight just a few things. That one, the current invasion is causing deterioration and a threat to our own food security situation, which to some extent was fragile. But government efforts had been made really to enhance food security in the country. It is also a challenge for pasture, for especially our communities that keep livestock. The herders will have a real challenge of pasture, and these may also cause movement from one place to another in search of pasture, with inherent risk or communal conflict over pasture or grazing land or passing territories. And we also appreciate that our planting season is coming soon. This may disrupt the planting. Initially, when we were talking, it was still not in the agricultural belt, but now we see the locusts also going to a real food production areas. And so what we have done as a government, we were not waiting for FAO and OCHA to come in. From our own security, from our own efforts, we've been doing aerial spraying and land-based spraying, and empowering our counties and local communities to be able to respond to the challenges posed by the desert locust. But these are inadequate in view of the magnitude of the locust that we are having now. I mean, my brother from Ethiopia would tell you that even in Addis Ababa, when there was an IGAD meeting, the issue of locust was a major issue. And for history, IGAD was originally started because of desert locusts. It transformed itself later on, until now it is more known for peacekeeping and peace operations in the region. But the original aim was a problem that was caused by locusts themselves. And so, since in the program I saw it was only 3 minutes for each one of us, mine is to say that we need support. But we need support while we ourselves have gone out of our way to tackle this issue. And we hope that with the support of the international community and through facilitation by OCHA and FAO, we should be able to partner with the local government and other key stakeholders in curbing the spread of the desert locust and mitigating communities that are affected by this unforeseen occurrence, which, in conclusion, should remind us of the real effects of climate change. We had heavy rains and flooding out of season. These are not normally our times for getting rains, but change in climate is real. We got rains, heavy rains, producing a conducive environment for the locusts to breed. And as we are talking now, if we don't curb it in the next in the next few weeks, this generation will produce another generation. The worst of all is that the lifespan of this locust is just about 3-4 months, but thereafter they do one-ton damage. I appeal to you to look into this and help us to curb the spread of the desert locust. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Excellency. Let me turn now to the Deputy Permanent Representative for Ethiopia. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Under Secretary General. Good morning, Excellencies. At the outset, I would like to thank the co-organizer of this event, the Office of Humanitarian Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and the FAO, on the recent upsurge of desert locusts in the Horn of Africa region. As you all have heard, billions of desert locusts are swarming across the Horn of Africa, mainly affecting Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia, and it has high probability to spread further. The swarms are massive and one of the worst outbreaks we witnessed in Ethiopia in 25 years. In addition to destroying crops in a region where nearly 20 million people face food insecurity, swarms also consume the vegetation on cattle grazing land in a matter of an hour. Hence, the countries in the region face unprecedented threats to food security and livelihood. Aerial and ground operations are in progress, but remains insufficient. Breeding during February and March will cause a further increase with numerous hoppers bands in all three countries. Some swarms may still reach Uganda and South Sudan. By the time I was preparing for this briefing, already they are in Uganda and maybe further. Excellencies, the immediate sector at risk in this locust upsurge is food security, and the climate change play an exacerbating role. Data shows that the last 5 years have been hotter than any others since the Industrial Revolution and since 2019. Studies have also linked a hotter climate to more damaging locust swarms, leaving Africa disproportionately affected. Wet weather also favors multiplication of locusts as abnormal rains cause a phenomenal accentuated breeding. In the long run, deployment of climate action solution and the intervention are critical to increase climate resilience for some of the most vulnerable communities across the continent. It is also critical to strengthening the capacity of early warning system of the countries in the region, as well as their mechanism to exchange information so that the intervention made would be effective and timely. In this regard, the 34th Extraordinary Summit of IGAD, heads of state and the government, held on 8 February 20 in Addis Ababa, underscores the need to work and coordinate with neighboring region, particularly Gulf states and the countries in the Arabian Peninsula, as well as the international community in eradicating the pests and addressing the broader aspect of climate change in the region. Hence, as Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, there is an immediate need to mobilize speedy and generous financial assistance to curb an outbreak of locusts in the Horn of African region. Excellencies, before concluding, allow me to highlight some of the measures Ethiopia is taking to prevent the locust upsurge in different parts of the country. In addition to deploying special trained crew that spray common pesticides that kill the insect in a matter of hours, the measures being taken include as follows. 1. Control of fledgling hoppers, immature adults, and the newly arriving egg-laying swarm. 2. Survey to identify more breeding sites, such as egg-laying adults and the egg fields. 3. Survey and the control of newly hatched hoppers, particularly in the Somali region and the other winter breeding area in Ethiopia. 4. Monitoring adult swarm movement to prevent mitigation to spring breeding sites. 5. Pesticide environmental impact assessment and the continued community awareness and the mobilization. Nevertheless, as the locusts spread, there are more of them than the local system can handle, and we call upon partners to support these national efforts to prevent the danger looming ahead of us in the region. I thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Ambassador. That's extremely clear. Now, We're going to show you another video to just try and give a picture to you. Pictures are worth 1,000 words, as we know, on to reinforce some of the points that we've been trying to convey. Detail across the region. So, Dominique, over to you.
No, thank you very much. Good morning. I would like to start by thanking the Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mr. Lowcock, for hosting this meeting, but also for the support we have received from OCHA since the very beginning of this crisis. Actually, we just returned together with my colleague Keith Cressman from the region. We have organized briefing 2 weeks ago in Nairobi with all your colleagues. Last week we had it in Geneva. We had one in Rome also. So I mean, we have been doing a lot of effort to raise awareness on indeed the level of threat that we are facing. And I would like perhaps to start by giving a bit of background on the situation we are facing and try to explain where it is actually coming from. What actually happened is that if you look at the Arabian Peninsula, 2 cyclones in May and October 2018 brought heavy rains to the so-called empty quarter, which is an area between Oman, Yemen, and Saudi Arabia, which is almost impossible to reach, and where there has been massive breeding of locusts, up to multiplying by up to 8,000 times in that area. As vegetation dried out in that area, there were movement first at the same time to Yemen as well as to the north towards Iran, Pakistan, India. When it comes to, if we look only at the southern movement that occurred at that time, it went into Yemen where again it found very good weather conditions, very exceptional rains that allowed for 1 or 2 more generation of desert locust. Of course, in the situation that we all know in Yemen, where it was therefore impossible to control the locust population on the ground in Yemen. From there, as of June last year, June 19, there were movement of locusts to northeastern Ethiopia as well as to northern Somalia. And then from northeastern Ethiopia to eastern Ethiopia, the Ogaden region, as well as to northeastern Somalia. At that point, normally, historically, statistics tells us that when vegetation dries out, the quantity of desert locusts decreases significantly, and with the control efforts that are being done by the government, it gets under control. The problem we have now, and it was mentioned by the previous speaker, is that we had Cyclone Pawam on the 7th of December of 2019, which brought huge amount of moisture exactly where the locusts were, in northeastern Somalia as well as in eastern Ethiopia. Therefore, creating ideal conditions for 1-2 more generations of locusts to develop. This is why, as of on 28 December, we saw the first locust swarms coming into Kenya, and since then it has been continuous. There has been locust swarms coming into Kenya and keep, of course, developing in the region where conditions are very favorable. As was said, we have now, for example, when it comes to Kenya, locust swarms in 15 counties in north and center Kenya, while in the meantime, I think, as was said, and as of last night, we got report that it was in Uganda as well as in Tanzania, where efforts are already ongoing for control operations. What is important to keep in mind is that in the 3 most affected countries of Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya, we have mature swarms that are therefore breeding, laying eggs, while in the meantime, there is, of course, some eggs that are already hatching and therefore upper bands developing. As a matter of fact, when we were in Kenya 3 weeks ago, we saw large quantity of swarms. Last week, last Thursday, we were in Puntland, towards the Garowe area, where we saw large quantities of upper bands at very different stages of development, meaning that there is really a big pressure. Now, when it comes to the forecast, the situation I've described with, breeding ongoing as well as hatching ongoing in the area means that there will be a new generation of locusts forming that will turn into locust swarms towards end of March and the whole duration of April, which, as was said by the previous speaker, coincides with the planting season in the area. In April, a portion of the swarms that are in Kenya may stay. And I think it's important that to realize that if they find good conditions, moisture in Kenya, they will stay in Kenya, there will be another generation, and therefore there will be a risk in terms of reinvasion later on in the year in Kenya. But in the meantime, at that time, we have this we have the change in the wind pattern in this intertropical area. Normally, at this point, the winds are blowing north to south. Then they will change to blow from south to north. And as you know, the locusts are not flying against the wind, but they are flying with the wind. This is why they go, as was said by Mr. Lowcock, up to 150 kilometers per day. So at that point, what will happen is that some will stay in Kenya, others will start reinvading Ethiopia, reinvading Somalia. They may even go they will most probably go also to Djibouti, Eritrea, and then some will go spend some time perhaps in South Sudan and then go to Sudan, while a portion of them may go for the big trip back to India-Pakistan border. So it is host to about 1 out of 4 acutely food insecure people. So it means that this is the worst case scenario, if you wish. And what we try to do now is to overlay the IPC map that shows acute level of food insecurity with the current infestation of locusts and the forecast in terms of the locust population. And what we see is that out of the 13 million people in Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, plus Eritrea, plus Djibouti, out of the 13 million, 9.75 million of them are located in areas that are currently affected by the locust. Of course, this is spreading very quickly, and as was said, Uganda numbers, South Sudan numbers need to be affected, to be included. What is important to realize is that, as was said, these are communities that are almost entirely depending on crop, on pastoralism, as well as on agro-pastoralism. What we have learned, the last such outbreak, upsurge, was in 2003, 2005 in the Sahel. And at that time, it was very well documented, the impact in terms of impact on crop with related food price spikes, impact on pasture with related impact in terms of conditions of animals, availability of milk, children malnutrition, untraditional movement of livestock across the region, therefore, as was said, creating the risk of tension among pastoralists and resident communities, as well as what was very well noticed at that point was the migration, and especially the migration of youth out of the region that were affected. So it shows really the importance of the situation we are facing. The next slide, actually, here we are trying to show the crop calendar versus the desert locust cycle. You have the crop calendar on the top, the pasture calendar in the middle, and the desert locust life cycle in the bottom. And here we see three things. We see that, as we said, the massive impact started relatively late in the year. So it means that it was towards the end of the cropping season, so towards harvesting, which explains that the impact on crop production has been relatively limited, even if there has been an impact that is currently being assessed, but relatively limited. Though anecdotal information we have, for example, from Somalia, says that wherever there were still standing crop, the level of devastation can be up to 100%. The second thing we see is that currently we are in between two seasons. So there is no active cropping ongoing. But the first thing we see is that as of April, May, the next planting season will start. And at that time, if you look at the bottom, you will have a mix of mature swarms, immature swarms that are the most voracious ones, and of upper bands. So it means at that time, if we go uncontrolled, this will be brewing, and you will have all type of locusts in the areas that are going to put at risk not only the planting, because if they see such quantities of locusts around, farmers may not even be able to plant in some areas. And then, of course, at the time of harvest, towards the time of harvest, again, a new generation will come and will put at risk food production. So the fact that we are, the bar in the middle, now in between two seasons, shows very well, as was mentioned by Mr. Lowcock, that this is the right time for anticipatory action. We have a very short window of opportunity to act and to act at scale. Now, just also to tell you in terms of our response. First, my colleague Keith was reminding me that when FAO was established in 1945, we were in the middle of a 14-year plague. So there was a massive desert locust outbreak at that time, which showed that since its very first day, FAO was fully immersed in desert locust control operation. The desert locust information system, which Keith is leading, is actually producing a lot of information, and is actually the oldest FAO early warning system that has been in function. Since then, it is regularly providing it is monitoring the situation across the world and providing countries with not only information on the situation, but also on the forecast using the latest available weather forecast models, etc. And of course, building on information that is gathered on the field by the teams by the government primarily, and which enables us to get a full picture of the situation. FAO is also working on capacity development and providing advice on control operations. And here, I think it's very important to realize that there is almost all the time control operations ongoing, and that these control operations they are always carried out by government. And actually, in 2019, in the whole situation that I've seen, over 2 million hectares were sprayed, were treated by government that were affected in all these countries. Here, however, the situation, because of PAWAM, because it went uncontrolled in some areas, because of PAWAM that has created ideal condition, the situation is becoming overwhelming. And this is why there is a need for international mobilization, international assistance to avoid a massive crisis. This is why also the Director General of FAO that you have seen on the video has declared the locust crisis in the Greater Horn of Africa as a corporate priority for FAO. He has decided that our level 3 protocols should be activated and that we should move towards mobilization across the organization using fast-track procedures, allocating FAO own resources in response to this situation, deploying staff, etc., etc. The FAO approach here is clearly about augmenting government capacities. I mean, the government in the countries, they are doing a great job that we need to salute, but the situation is overwhelming. Therefore, our strategy is to augment their capacity. Our response is also informed by previous responses. The one in 2003, 2005, that was the independent evaluation that was carried out after that one was saying you had too much focus on only locust control operations, and you needed to do more on the livelihood side. And this is why now we have a focus on anticipatory action by controlling, to prevent a deterioration of the food security situation, by controlling the locust upsurge, the locust population, and by protecting and restoring the livelihood of affected communities. This is why we have issued on 23rd of January a first appeal that is for $76 million, and that is articulated around 4 components. On the first one, on, of course, controlling the spread of desert locust by supporting government in terms of surveillance capacities, advice in terms of control operations, and even support in terms of pesticides, biopesticides, in terms of equipment for aerial spraying or ground control operations. Indeed, if you are talking of upper bands, you do control operations. If you are talking of swarms, you do aerial spraying. The second component is on safeguarding livelihoods. It means we are talking of areas where we have population in IPC 3-4 that are therefore super vulnerable, that have therefore a risk of falling into even more severe acute food insecurity. So therefore, what can we do to beef up their livelihood through cash intervention, supplementary livestock feed, farming input package? Third component is on really supporting the communities that have been hit already, and this is a bit later, but still there are some that need to be done, that need to be supported. And then the fourth component is on coordination, including the deployment of highly qualified acridologists, which is the name of desert locust experts. I mean, these are very rare events, 70 years, 25 years. You cannot therefore expect countries to have a cadre of experts in that area, and we are therefore mobilizing experts from regions that are not affected for the moment. And unfortunately, the only region that is not affected for the moment is the western region, the region North Africa and West Africa, where we are therefore recruiting experts and deploying them to the countries. Of course, you realize language barrier and so on and so forth. Now, if I go to my last slide, which is indeed in terms of the funding situation. As you see, we have an appeal that is for $76 million. It is, for the moment, about 28% funded, which shows that there is really a huge gap to be plugged. I need, however, to thank, of course, again, OCHA for the very early support that was provided, as well as the government of Germany, Sweden, Switzerland, US, Belgium, the EU through ECHO, and the African Solidarity Trust Fund, which is a mechanism, a fund hosted in FAO, funded by African countries to support action in other African countries, and then, of course, the government of Denmark and of Saudi Arabia. I think what I also want to highlight is that though we have this close partnership with OCHA for the moment, we have also very good partnership with WFP. For example, when it comes to impact assessment, using the VAM unit, etc., working on impact assessment on the ground. This is actually ongoing in the countries, even though, as I said, we are in between two seasons. And then also with WFP in terms of aerial support, especially using UNHAS to see how we can benefit from UNHAS capacities, for example, in terms of helicopters for the surveillance, for transportation of some of the goods. Bearing in mind that when it comes, for example, to spraying, we are talking of really highly specialized type of technologies that we are using ultra-low volume, etc., etc. So just to finish here, but to say that for us, the window of opportunity is extremely short. We are ready on the ground. We have a pipeline that is ongoing to support the countries. But as you can see, the level of funding is very low, and therefore we need your at-scale support now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominique. I hope that was helpful to colleagues. Let me just emphasize a couple of points that I think come out clearly from Dominique's presentation. The first thing is just to remind you that of the 13 million most food insecure people, so the people most vulnerable to, high mortality, of the 13 million of them, 10 million of those people are in areas currently now affected by the infestation. So there is a clear and present danger to those 10 million people. The second thing, which again comes out of the picture Dominique showed about what's going to happen over the next few months, is essentially that not acting now is basically an invitation to the locusts to help themselves to people's crops and pasture in June and July, when the crops and pasture will be at their ripest and most attractive. It's an invitation to the locusts. And again, just to emphasize another point, the response today is not going to work. Unless there's a big scale up, what we've just shown you is what we think is going to happen. And that will then be a big preoccupation for all of us, and a very expensive preoccupation, by the way, for all of us for the second half of the year. So I hope that is helpful in terms of providing information. I mean, obviously, it's great to have the senior FAO colleagues here, especially Keith, who I think has dedicated his whole life to fighting the locust. So if there's anybody in the room who has got questions, who's got things they need to know, or things they know are being kind of asked about in capitals, please do not leave the room without asking your questions. And I'm going to open the floor now so you can all have a chance to do that. Yeah, Sana, go ahead, and then the EU. So United States first, please.
Today was actually incredibly interesting. We don't often go into this level of detailed briefings. So thanks to OCHA and thanks to FAO's leadership on this crisis, the technical expertise, the real-time and accurate data. I think that this is something we needed to hear here in New York. We also appreciate the SURF and the release of the money. And the U.S., as you saw, has released $800,000 as well as some PPE and protective equipment. And strategically, we are looking more to fund both the immediate and middle term. So we look forward to discussions on that going forward. We understand the urgency as laid out by the Undersecretary General. Just to say that we appreciate you touching on the fact that being a corporate emergency for FAO and your priorities, but also leveraging the other aspects of the system and the work with the other UN agencies is incredibly important. So as we go forward, discussing that more and talking about how we're leveraging the other agencies to provide expertise or support as needed is incredibly welcome. So just thanks very much.
First to thank you, OCHA and FAO, for organizing this briefing that I agree has been very comprehensive, very useful. From our side, from the European Union, we fully share your assessment and your concerns about the situation. And also, we also would like to highlight the need to continue monitoring the situation in the countries affected, but also in the countries that are not yet affected, but could be affected in the future. We fully take note about this is early warning, the need to anticipatory action, and of course your call for acting basically now. The European Union has mobilized 1 million euros as an immediate response, but of course we are exploring about additional funding that we hopefully will be able to announce in the coming days. Jasper has a question. I mean, Dominique, you have referred in your presentation. My question was about measures that could be taken in order to ensure that human and animal health are not endangered by the use of pesticides, and how this could be explored in the response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Canada, please. Dominique.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you to the ambassadors as well, and to FAO for coming here and for briefing us today. I would echo other colleagues in the room who have already said I think this is one of the most comprehensive briefings that I've attended in my 5 years here. And I think it's actually really useful. You know, a lot of the maps that have been put up, I think, show just how much this is really an intersection of a number of different issues. We're seeing the intersection of climate change, we're seeing the intersection of conflict, and we're seeing how the most vulnerable are really being affected. So that really hit home for me today, and I think this has been very useful in terms of informing us about what is happening here. I'd like to say that we welcome very much the decision to release some anticipatory funding from the SURF. I think that's an excellent use of the funds here, and something that we're very pleased to see. I've been in discussions with Capital, and I will be going back to Capital after this as well to see how it is that we may be able to assist further. And so this information has been really useful for me today, so thank you. Just one question that I had about this. You had mentioned partnerships with WFP in particular in addressing the crisis. I'm wondering if there are other partnerships with other UN agencies or other actors on the ground that have been particularly useful, or other areas where coordination or partnerships could be better implemented. It would just be useful to get a bit of a sense of which actors are engaged in this and how we can better coordinate with everyone involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, Coco's ears must be burning now, so we're going to go straight to WFP.
Thank you, Mark, and also to OCHA and FAO for this really important briefing today. We'd also like to express on behalf of WFP solidarity to countries like Kenya, Ethiopia, and others, but also the people affected by locusts. As mentioned already by Dominique, I understand there's good collaboration between WFP and FAO on the ground, but also at Rome level. So impact assessments, food security surveys, as well as with UNHAS, possible aerial support, including contracting type of support. So we welcome that, and we look forward to the continuing collaboration with FAO. Also, as mentioned by Mark, I think the early action part is really important, where we have to prevent the worsening food insecurity situations and already fragile food security environments. So on that note, just to say really we'll welcome the collaboration. We stand ready for further collaboration. But one question, I know that there's been different scenarios that we've been looking at. And as mentioned already, 10 million of the 13 million already affected. In terms of worst or likely scenarios in food insecurity situations, are you looking at already numbers? If you could mention some of that food scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else who's got questions or would like to take the floor? Okay, so let's hear again from Dominique, and let's hear from Keith as well. So over to the two of you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Keith, as being really the guru of the locust here, will speak on the question on the pesticides and impact on, and the measures we are taking here. As Canada said clearly, we are talking of the convergence of issues. Climate change, conflict, etc. This is, again, it shows that conflict has an impact on that sort of situation. The best case being what we see in Ethiopia. In Yemen, where indeed the situation has been brewing, and where we are afraid that it may continue to brew, and therefore will keep injecting locusts. So hence the need to find ways to even do control operations in that sort of context. In terms of the partnership, we are, of course, working very closely with regional institutions. For example, there is the Desert Locust Control Organization for East Africa that has been there for many decades, that is supporting the countries directly in terms of providing aircraft for the spraying of the field, etc., etc. Again, their capacity are overwhelmed, but we are working with them to increase their capacities and make sure that they can indeed continue to respond. We are, of course, working with IGAD in the context of the Food Security Nutrition Working Group that is very active in the region in terms of monitoring the food security situation. As was said, we work with WFP also as co-lead of the food security cluster. FAO is the co-lead together with WFP of the food security cluster. And when it comes to the component of livelihood protection and livelihood restoration, the work will be done through the clusters. So it means that in that context, we will work with WFP and all the partners of the cluster to make sure that indeed we are able to scale up the support that is being provided. And then an initiative that is very important also is the Global Network Against Food Crisis, in which many of the donors, the partners around this table are very much engaged, and which is really about finding lasting solution to food crisis, and which in that context promotes anticipatory action and promotes also the preventative work that needs to be done. Because one of the striking number that comes out of the 2003-2005 response was that at the end of the day, the total cost for controlling the locust in 2003-2005 was $570 million, which is equivalent to 170 years of preventive work for the 10 countries. So it means really, it shows the importance of making that sort of investment to make sure that the countries, that the countries are well prepared, considering that, as was said, we see the impact of climate change. One of the impact of climate change is more frequent, more intense event like the one we are seeing in terms of cyclones. And therefore, the need for the countries to be better prepared to what we would call this new normal. So when it comes to the worst case scenario, well, the worst case scenario, of course, is if we don't manage to go at scale and control, it will keep brewing, and therefore there will be not only the food security situation in the countries, the 3 worst affected countries for the moment that will be affected, but also the one South Sudan, Uganda. I mean, so we may see a massive deterioration of the food security situation, and this is why the IPC, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, working with the WFP and others, is trying to get some scenario to see where it could lead to. But this is obviously a worst scenario, a worst case scenario, cannot be excluded. And I think what is important to mention is that, again, if you look at previous type of event, it was always the combination of events. For example, if you look at the situation that has occurred in 2003, 2004 in Niger, I mean, at the beginning there were good conditions for the locusts, but then what happened is that there was a severe drought. So it was the impact of the locust plus the drought that brought a huge food security crisis. I mean, we are talking of a region, the Horn of Africa, that is regularly exposed to that sort of extreme weather events. So you will have communities that will be hit by the locust, and that we cannot exclude be hit right after by a drought or a poor season. So therefore, a very big risk. Keith, on the animal health?
Partnerships. We're also partnering with WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, in terms of provision of supplementary meteorological data for assessments and forecasts, and also to help better forecast these extreme weather events that are the triggers to situations that we see now in the Horn of Africa. In terms of pesticides, this is a very common topic that is raised by just about everyone, and the concern in terms of environmental and public health. The pesticides that are being used are common pesticides. These are pesticides that are registered in the countries of use. They're also registered in the European Union, in the States. They are not banned pesticides, so they're not these old-fashioned hazardous chemicals that we used to use. They're not used any longer. The formulation is something, as Dominique mentioned earlier, something called ultra-low volume, ULV. So what this basically means, in common terms, is that these are very low volumes of pesticide that are being used at high concentrations. So we're not washing the desert with pesticides out of a fire hose per se. They're very small, tiny droplets that must hit the insect. So this is precision spraying. So this means that only highly trained teams with experience are undertaking the control operations. It is not being undertaken by farmers or by communities. It is being undertaken by DLCOA, as Dominique mentioned, and by the National Plant Protection Services. In addition, the pesticides, they break down and they evaporate within 24 hours. Under the current conditions in the locust habitats, they are no longer useful after 1 day. So that means they're no longer toxic at that point. Now, of course, when operations are being conducted in areas of animals, grazing animals, or communities, their fauna in these areas. So in sensitive areas such as near water bodies and grazing areas, near habitations, near wild beekeepers where you can't move the hives out of the trees, biopesticides are a very, very good alternative. And they are now commercially available. And just by coincidence, they're made in Kenya. So the transport costs are very minimal.
Thank you very much. Any further points anybody would like to make? Okay, well, our main request to you is please, if you could take this back to your capitals and report and tell them what we think. And secondly, if you need any information which will speed up people's decision making, please do not hesitate to contact Dominique and Keith. In the meantime, thank you very much indeed. That concludes the session.
السنين اللي فاتت كان بيوصل معانا 2 جنيه ونص ولحد جنيه ونص، ما كانش بيلمها، ما بيجيش مصاريفه خالص. السنه اللي فاتت طبعا زي ما حكينا العنب اغلبيته كله، العنجود كان كله القلب بتاع العنجود كان كله حب صغير، ما جابش نتيجه معانا.
ادي 5 12 2 معانا الواحد.
فبنضطر بقى العنب بقى بنضطر ان نبيع بخساره، بدل ما نستفاد ان هو يبوظ في الشجره، لا نبيع بخساره وخلاص، مش مزعلاني، لان لو سبته في الشجره باظ دي هتزعلني اكتر.
الطماطم كده.
الفوائد الرئيسيه للمشروع بتاع التجفيف والوحده اللي احنا موجودين فيها، اول حاجه انها بتقلل الفائض في الطماطم. لو حصل في الطماطم عندنا زياده في الانتاج بنقدر نستوعب الانتاج الزايد عندنا في التجفيف. الحاجه الثانيه انها بتزود فرص عمل، بتوجد فرص عمل وبالاخص للسيدات.
في ناس كتير يعني بتعتمد عليها اعتماد كلي، بالنسبة لبنت هتجهز، بالنسبة لست بتساعد جوزها، بالنسبة لشاب بيكمل عشان يبني حياته كده يعني.
طيب حلو جدا. شوف لي دي كام؟
اتعلمت من التدريبات مثلا كان مشروع ان درجه بالنسبه للسكريات مثلا، يعني مثلا 20% تبقى نسبه السكريات عاليه مظبوطه كويسه. كميه التسميد اللي انا ممكن نسميتها زياده على اللزوم ما الشجره ما تستفادش بيها، فطبعا هي لها حاجه معينه، حجم معين هي تاخد تسميد عشان تستفاد بيه ما يروحش هدر مني في الارض.
هو انت لو حجمت هيروح فين؟ مش هيلاقي مكان. لما لقيت الوضع كده تشغله كده كل 15 يوم، كل 15 يوم.
المشروع ساعد بشكل كبير جدا صغار المزارعين في تقليل الفقد بعد الحصاد من العنب، من خلال التعرف على العمليات الفنيه واداره المحصول بشكل كبير جدا عشان نقلل فرص الامراض.
انا نحترم الاكل برضه عشان خاطر تعبت وشقيت، فبنحترم الاكل.
36
والله انا متفائلين ان شاء الله السنين اللي جايه علينا دي ان شاء الله متفائلين الحمد لله. يعني السنين اللي عدت دي كلها طبعا ضيعتنا في خسائر ياما، فاحنا الحمد لله يعني في خير جاي ومتفائلين. ربنا يسهل الحال ان شاء الله، الحلقه يبقى تمام ان شاء الله.
وفر علينا لأنه كتير برد ببكاسين، وبعدين إذا ما نروح نجيب حطب بنتعب كتير بالحرج، فبنوصل على المعمل تبع بكاسين نشتري الحطبات وبنجي. شعوري كتير منيح لأنه فتح فرص عمل كبيرة لأولاد الضيعة. جيراني مثلا أولاد جيراني صاروا عم يشتغلوا فيه، أولاد أصحابي عم يشتغلوا فيه، وجبلتهم جوزي كمان عم يشتغل بالمعمل.
كان مهم للبلدية إنه تفوت بهذا المشروع لحتى تحمي أكبر حرش صنوبر بالشرق الأوسط اللي هو حرش بكاسين من الحرايق. فبيقوموا بتشحيل الأحطاب اليابسة اللي هي منا بقى لازمة للشجرة، بيرجعوا بيستعملوها بهذا المعمل.
نحن كلنا ربينا بهالحرش، وولادنا كمان نتمنى انه يربوا اولادنا في هالحرش ويلاقوا ضل على طول نظيف، واكيد باهميه المعمل الموجود بمنطقه بكاسين.
This country did not produce briquettes, and so when we tested the provision of briquettes to the poorest community that relied on heat stoves to warm up during the winter, we need to bring them from abroad. But then we started to develop the production of briquettes in Lebanon, which means sustainable forest management, means no illegal cutting of trees. So this project has an impact from the top level of strategic policy down to the level of single households.
And that's exactly where UNDP has a match with our objectives in terms of what we like to do here. Renewable energy, like we do here in Lebanon, is something that's very much in Europe's interest.
This project has helped to assist the ministry in achieving many of the steps that were set forth to achieve our main goal, namely achieving 12% of our energy mix to be based on renewable energies.
Lebanon really could become a hub for green jobs, which are the jobs of the future. When you develop new skills, introduce new technologies, you protect the environment, and at the same time you're promoting economic growth, you attack multiple goals at the same time.
How do you define poverty?
Poverty?
Poverty.
Oh, that's a good question.
That's too difficult of a question. Can I have some keynotes? I don't know.
Difficult to make a living and get by.
Having $1 less than what you need.
No chance for upward mobility.
Quality of life that's extremely hard to bear.
Total lack of shelter and food.
When you can't afford, what's the basic needs?
Do you think around the world is poverty increasing or decreasing?
Increasing?
I think overall it's decreasing.
It's increasing.
It's getting worse.
I think actually people are probably falling more into poverty.
Would it surprise you to know that 250,000 people leave extreme poverty every day?
That's surprising.
Oh man.
Well, that's impressive.
Oh, that's good to know.
I'd like to hear that, yes. I just tell you, I'm pleasantly surprised by that stat.
So when I go back, I'm going to tell my roommates, and then they'll know, and then they're going to tell their friends, and then, yeah.
مشروع خان الوكالة يمثل حجر الأساس في الحفاظ على هوية نابلس الثقافية التراثية الفلسطينية الأصيلة. المشروع يقع في نقطة اتصال ما بين البلدة القديمة بتراثها القديم وهويتها الثقافية الأصلية لمدينة نابلس وبين التوسع الحديث للمدينة. سيكون هو البداية في ترويج وتسويق باقي معالم البلدة القديمة في مدينة نابلس. هذا الحكي سيشجع السياحة الداخلية والخارجية للبلدة القديمة في نابلس.
خان الوكالة عمره 400 سنة، وإحنا كقطاع خاص اجينا على هذا المكان التاريخي العظيم اللي هو خان الوكالة، بدنا نستثمره. عندنا عدة مخططات، بما أنه عندنا 11 محل فصفى عندنا 11 رح يكون خلينا نقول صنايعية. عندنا 21 غرفة ما بين هوستل وفندق، ورح هو أصلا رح يجي يلاقي المحل جاهز من معدات، هو بس بيجيب يعني اللي هو المختص في عدته وبيجي بيستلم محله.
اشتغلت في أعمال الترميم في داخل البلدة القديمة لمدة سنة، بعديها تم إعادة ترميم خان الوكالة فاشتغلت فيه، وبعد ذلك تم توظيفي في خان الوكالة إنه أقوم بأعمال صيانة. كل اللي تعلمته كنت أطبقه في الخان. طبعا هذا الحكي أثر علي إنه قدرت أكون أسرة من خلال شغل متواصل في الخان.
The restoration is important, first of all, to preserve the cultural heritage of Palestine and also to create economic opportunities in the city of Nablus.
Khan el-Wakale is also a way of translating the aspiration of Palestinian people for a better future, for better livelihoods, and to share it with tourists, both internally and international tourists.
أعطاني دفعة إنه أصير أقرأ عن تاريخ نابلس، وأخذت دورات سياحية وتاريخية وتراثية عن مدينة نابلس وعن الحضارات الأخرى.
وتلقائيا رح يرتفع المستوى الاقتصادي لسكان البلدة القديمة ولمدينة نابلس، رح يأثر على رفع المستوى الاقتصادي في المشروع محيطه ومدينة نابلس.
قدمت لأنه في يوم من الأيام كان عندي طموح إنه هذه المنطقة يكون فيها مخيم سياحي. المخيم عبارة عن مجموعة مرافق، سواء كانت مرافق صحية أو خيم مبيت أو مطبخ وصالة طعام وخيم بدوية. هاي واحدة من الخيم المبيت بدنا نفرجيكم إياها. تحتوي على فرشتين وعلى حرامين وعلى علاقة وعلى فانوس. هذا المكان صالة الطعام بتم فيه وجبة الفطور والغداء والعشاء. اختيار هذا المكان كان الإطلالة جميلة، بطل أيضا على منطقة طولها 165 كيلومتر من البحر الميت وحتى وادي عربة. أثرت علي منحة الاتحاد الأوروبي على حياتي إنها وفرت لي أول شيء فرصة عمل إلي، إنه وفرت عدة فرص عمل وراح أوفر فرص عمل أكثر في حالة توسعته.
قبل منحة الاتحاد الأوروبي كنت أنا شغال، بلشت في سكينة ثمنها 20 دينار. هلأ أنا عندي أدوات وعدد خاصة في المطاعم والمطابخ. منحة الاتحاد الأوروبي صرنا 9 موظفين، كلهم من عجلون، كلهم من المناطق المحيطة.
Here we are standing at this beautiful forest here in Jordan, and that's where we have witnessed today the landmark of 47 projects, all of them in support of women, gender equality, as well as supporting local economic development.
قدمت للمنحة أولاً لتحسين الدخل، سواء كان دخلي أو دخل الناس اللي أنا باخذ من عندهم الحليب. كنت أشتغل 50-60 كيلو يومياً، بلشت أشتغل على 250-300 كيلو جرام يومياً.
This project has been able to attract women, in particular women entrepreneurs, in developing the economy. And it has shown that with the opportune training and development opportunities, women can become actors of development and actors of change. And I think that this is a lesson that we have to learn in order to identify what are the obstacles that prevent Jordanian women from becoming effective participants in the workforce or effective entrepreneurs, in order to give them the tools and the opportunities that they need in order to flourish and develop.
زمان ما كان يشتغل ستات عندنا في مطاعمنا وفي المطابخ. هلا أنا موجود عندي 4 صبايا بيشتغلوا معي في المطعم.
يعتبر هذا المشروع حقيقة من قصص النجاح المهمة للتعاون ما بين الاتحاد الأوروبي على الدعم الكبير وبرنامج الأمم المتحدة الإنمائي في الأردن الذي قدم الدعم الفني لإنجاح هذه المشاريع. نتمنى أن تعمم هذه التجربة في كافة محافظات المملكة والاستمرار دائما. هي بلشت القصة بسوريا. جدي ووالد والدي كان شغال بالصنعة. الحاج فتح محل ب 83، بعدين صار ازدحام الحمد لله وتطور وصار محله يعني من الأوائل ال20 على سوريا تقريبا. هلا بقالي بمصر 6 سنين. عم اشتغل بصناعة الحلويات صار لنا 4 سنين 5 سنين تقريبا. سبنا سوريا بسبب الحرب اللي صارت والأزمة. قعدنا فترة وبعدين سبحان الله مثل ما قلت لك اضطرينا انه بدنا نشتغل، لازم نشتغل، اللي ما بينبع بيخلص. فتحت انا واخي محل بالحي الاول ومحل بالشيخ زايد بنورد لهم حلويات. نحن عبارة عن 10 عمال تقريبا 12 عامل. استهدفنا الشريحة السورية، لقينا في اقبال من الشريحة المصرية. كل جيل عم يضيف على اللمسه السوريه، على اللمسه السوريه، فكل جيل عم يتطور اكثر. انا نفسي يتطوروا الاولاد ونفسي يفتحوا محلات. المال اللي مو ببلادك لا لك ولا لاولادك. قد ما كان اشتغلت هون بالاخير ما في، يعني ما في هون، ما رح نخلد في إننا بلدنا نرجع لها. شو بده يصير فيها؟ خلصت الحرب ما خلصت الحرب، شو ما خلصت بدنا نرجع.
I cannot advise anybody to enter in Libya. You will die for nothing. If you stay there every day, they are coming to do a bad things to you, to do a bad things. One day, they will kill you.
The cases mainly are of traumas, of people of war have lesions from tortures, and sometimes it seems that they really use knives to torture them. The lesions are so well defined and so strange that you see that they are made for on purpose.
Donner de l'argent à vous avez souvent un bateau tué. Tirer bien sûr les 2 jouets.
Oui.
N'attends pas, je suis là comme ça. La vie en Libye, vraiment, c'est une vie en fer. Vraiment, dommage, je rêve à ça. Vraiment, je ne sais pas comment un homme peut vivre encore après ce genre de choses.
Another 4.
तुम्हारे तेरे درا عرق ورد تشنا هذا عرض درا ما جري
Horror, what is she there? Azamar, what is she there? Araba, some mother. Mura, Hasa, I go to Badayara, Nakondia, Ayara, Rataya, Totaba, the Benoe, Benevara, Dolhoja, Budotori, Badara, Baratavazere, came out to Saturday, Tavana, Rashidi.
हमारा गोली मारी फैले तो मारी दिया आए और मुरा गोली गोए दें तो एड़ा बंदे ले देड़ा तो गोली मार देड़ा और किंग नहीं था फौज गई दूध era era kutu alongoli pada diri ara ekolo fare dia suda ana ada dile shilende ar bon ada di ara argo sudo bhai hasira sirogi
Children on the move are children, no matter where they come from. Rohingya children have been tragically forgotten. Let's give them a chance to be protected, to learn, and to thrive.
নিজের চোখে দেখি না এটা যায় না ভারি তো আর বন্ধু নয় মারি ফেলার দেয় আর যায় না তোর আর মারি দিব তারা তো মেলেছে মারি গুলি মারার পর আর বন্ধু আর মারি ফেলায় না তো মারি ফেলাই মতো আর আই এটা গল লাগে না এটা তোর নে কালাই তালা না ভারি ফন্না তন্না জানারি আরি ফন্না
Right now you need to clean, to drink, to bathe, to do everything. The same water that destroyed is the same water we need right now.
These women are planting cocoa a few hours north of the Dominican Republic's capital. Not long ago, they saw so few opportunities to live off their land that many made a living cleaning houses in the city. Now these women, led by Flor Maria Brioso, the president of their Farmers Federation, have returned to the countryside, investing their time and labour in their new business.
If we plant cocoa, in the future we can sell cocoa. I won't need to leave my field to go to the city because this cocoa project guarantees a future to my family here, living in the countryside.
Flor's opportunity to make a living off her land is the result of a unique alliance between the private sector and the government. The vision for this new partnership began in 2012 with the country's National Development Strategy, which aims to eradicate rural poverty by 2030. The government sees the private sector as taking a lead role in achieving this, as they are the main drivers of wealth and profit in the country.
For this reason, it's necessary that the government facilitates the private sector to become the key driver of the economy, to dynamize the economy.
Now, through an innovative government project, the private sector is taking an active role in poverty alleviation. The Dominican Agribusiness Board, known as JAD, is an umbrella organization of agricultural industries, exporters and producers. Through a nationwide mentorship program, it is now transforming organizations of small producers into profitable and sustainable businesses. Using criteria such as poverty levels and marketability of products, JAD has already identified 70 organizations to work with. They are supported both financially and technically by the UN's International Fund for Agricultural Development.
I would say that there are four main actors at play in the system: the public sector, the private sector, the producers' organizations, and the business plan.
The business plan is at the core of this project, and it is the first thing the groups learn to do.
Primero se le enseña a evaluar su entorno.
First, the producer is taught how to assess their surroundings. Then they are taught how to assess niches within the market of their products and what activities they need to do to competitively integrate themselves into the market.
Insertarse en el mercado.
Once the business plan is approved, the group is given the funds and training to implement it, along with the development of financial and administrative skills. For most producers' organizations, like this one that grows avocados, this is the first time they've opened a bank account, let alone developed a business plan. 2 years ago, they were just scraping by. Now this group, known as the Cambita Cluster, has the certifications they need and a new packing plant, and they're about to start exporting to Europe.
After the implementation of the business plan, the changes we had to make were radical. It created a new culture in the producer, a culture of hygiene, a protection of the environment, protection of the worker and the consumer, which were attributes that our producers didn't have.
Besides the change in culture, farmers' incomes have also doubled, and membership in the organisation has increased by 40%. According to JAD's executive president Osmar Benitez, the success is because farmers themselves set their own business goals and drive the process.
Yo creo que el hecho de que estas alianzas público-privadas
I think the fact that this private-public partnership enables farmers to be actors of their own development is a unique and special feature of this project, because no one knows better than the farmers themselves where they want to go.
para saber a dónde quieren llegar.
And Flor Brioso knows just where she wants to go.
I want women farmers to move out of poverty and to achieve something, to have the small house, a business, and savings.
And with more than 13,000 other farming families already learning to build successful businesses, many more people like Flor are able to generate profits, and the Dominican Republic is closer to achieving its goal of completely eliminating rural poverty.
Ana chola na ma kwaya nderun ke thir am challe ga ma kwaya nderun ke kwa ga yor bai haje ana jibana ta gari ri chan panda area ya lwel chinti bo reti o che ba yo ko mama ti kan ba wa de anu kayon chigan chidunga kan karo kia ayo ko ja pinga gang ken ka ja rio yelwel nan bi kar ka baroki ka chama na rile kan ka cham rile ari ko jalu tian bi tier wa cha ya piu de ka aliu anu piu dia le mama dia to anu baba dia ka iya kana rana benon kwan kwanye ne ran ku te chimit ka latin ran to mit ka Tom ka pan jeng kwai benten anje mis ka ko anu wera ka lui ka wajar ja jam la mama dun kan ba wa tin apir ka yo pyo jamiet
anje pyo dia ore tulal mis ka chi pir chan mis ka chi ke ame chi yan ku ba chi lo yore ti chi ke ka tin chani
o an chan mama dian be ban tin ko Wana ya ta ya pyo chano chi ninja.
Pyo chi ba lu pyo na tiang ke tiang an ke. Ya we chi ben jan. An ya we chi ben jan chi ga la tin cha ni ku adam pin. Ku je kwen. Mo ku pyo mi fa chi ben.
Woran aya e ba chi ga chi ro lo.
An chi nam de mare yen ret. Ade tang yen ben. Pada tangian pol chan jarmat ko mi
ko ba ya lu man sama chan ba ko ya ko iman ni ba ko ba bu ko ya ko ne ria ko ji mar ken ga de ko
In 2005, my friends and myself decided to come together to create a youth program that would help many more refugee students to access education.
So I love to be a doctor. When I'm in at home or at work, I help my people in the community to solve the problem of diseases.
Ora. I'm fine. We tell you good morning. Dạ chưa cái đến coi. Dạ chưa cái đi. Cái tranh mà bậy bè nào. Con mấy phút này cơ chuyện này nhìn cái sao Sudan qua tên là thằng quan cô chả được tên từ chuyện này rồi đã chuyện nào cô bạn cô nào cái nào thằng quan dân qua chuyện này rồi cái nào cô bạn côเป็น boy girl boy B O Y F đó F nhóc N Oh. Mitaguar ron deru long karum ngan karwala. Jenda la wale muna.
Mà này người nhà ông đây này riêng, con đáp cái gì, đây này nhỏ đua mà gọi mới đây này thích cái gì.
Nên bạn bây giờ mình nghe ra nhà nó, coi là nghe kẻ đó. Bây giờ nằm bên đó. Qua, nhấn này. Qua. Nói cái gì? Nhấn này. Sedang garitan, dah bom ko đang đi qua. Janji nak jual gigi. Đi chụp. Tin. Awa. Kamu lapan je wajib lagi dal gara. Ini jadi kiri jalan dan jangan lupa dal gara. Dal gara belati dal gara. Cuman countires. Jadi aku try dia kan dang di saat ke luang aja namanya. Dan kayak ger kena mi dang di ulang kelas itu. Kalau aja anda nak kami dengar juga, idul gora aku tu, dia dah nanti cetak.
In 1950, the seas were abundant with fish, with 22% of the available stock being fished at a sustainable level, leaving 78% developing or underexploited. But over the years, that's changed. Shortly thereafter, parts of the ocean became overexploited, with fish being removed faster than they can be naturally replenished. In 1961, parts of the ocean started to collapse, never before seen in our history, and over the years, that trend continued. At last count, in 2014, only 17% of the world's fish stocks were considered developing. 16% of stocks were overfished, and 2% were collapsed. Overfishing leads to annual global economic losses of $83 billion. By 2030, global aquaculture will need to grow by at least 4% per year to meet projected demand. But there is hope. Marine protected areas support the recovery of fish
Ban Convention. People know it as the Ottawa Convention. So in the mid-90s, we were talking about Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, contamination, Afghanistan, minefields, landmines. The situation evolved. The attention of the world started turning to other categories of weapons, cluster munitions, you know, these bombs that contain 600 to 800 sub-bombs, sub-munitions. And de facto, that UN service, which was created in the mid-90s, started acquiring an expertise, an experience, and equipment that made it the UN resource for pretty much everything that explodes. Now we're going to the legacy of conflicts. Everything that is fired in a conflict which does not explode on impact will explode afterwards. And of course, the weapon that is the weapon of choice of terrorists and terrorist groups, armed groups, that is improvised explosive devices. So that's really what we do. Now, do we do just demining, as you said?
It's far beyond that.
It's mine action. So what is mine action? Mine action, it covers all the aspects. It goes from, of course, I would say at field level, you understand that immediately when you come out of your car after a conflict and you say, oops, is it contaminated? So it's surveying, assessing the threat, what the contamination is about. In that case, we mark, we fence off, sometimes we demine, we destroy. The first activity that you carry out to save lives is risk education. So risk education is really specifically tailored to the population we serve. It's tailored to the country, the contamination, the culture, the men, the women, the kids, to explain to them the do's and don'ts, and to explain to them to report. You don't get close, you don't touch.
Exactly.
And we do the demining, of
course.
Right,
and we're going to be talking about each of those issues as we go along. Well, in fact, we'll look at Afghanistan and Iraq in just a moment. Before I forget it, years ago we used to hear about landmines. We hear about them in Colombia with FARC. We heard about them in Cambodia, different places like that. But they're still much more prevalent around the world than we realize, are they not? How many? Do we have an idea of how many countries where there are landmines buried?
We still have something like 60 countries.
60
countries that are contaminated. I have to say, on landmines, anti-personnel landmines, there has been a great deal of progress that is linked to the fact that this treaty I was talking about, that bans landmines from manufacturing to transfer, selling, and that obliges countries to clean up their territories. We have 164 countries that have ratified that treaty. What did it do? It shrunk the market. And with the activities that were carried out, the zones that used to be contaminated by landmines have shrunken. So, but we still, it's a painful job. It's slow.
Very tedious.
It's very tedious. It's very tedious. Yes. A great deal of progress has been made. We still have to look at the legacy wars like Iran-Iraq, for instance. We still have parts of the territories that are done. But we have success stories. You mentioned Afghanistan. I would say roughly 80% of the country has been cleared. We have a great success story, Mozambique. Mozambique, mine-free. Now, Afghanistan, 80% done. The 20% is always the difficult part, because you start with the easy part where you have access, when you have the money, when everybody is rallying. It would be in mountainous areas. It would be in places that are difficult to access by roads. It happens at a time when countries are not so eager to help us, to give money, and we have new contamination by other types.
where they are? Do you get with the people who planted them? Do you get with the rebels? Do they keep track of where they plant them? They don't do it like this. They're not methodical.
Not always. I would say in the old days, and I would not say in the good old days, but in the old days.
The old days.
The wars were between countries, and the military would lay mines, and they would have maps. So in the best case scenario, we would get maps and we would get the information about where they are. The conflicts have evolved in nature. It's now a lot of non-state armed groups, factions, lawless, terrorists, all kinds, that will just plant whatever they have, wherever they are. And we don't get these maps. In some best case scenarios, when a peace is negotiated and we start working with the former combatants, we may get some information. But in most cases, what we need to do is what we call a survey. So we start talking to people to say, has there been an accident recently or not? We do satellite imagery. Something that used to be clean and worked on, all of a sudden is taken over by nature. It means that people don't go back there. And then we talk to people. And then when we have an idea of where the situation is, then we go through technical surveys with the detectors and the detection machines.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Let's talk about Afghanistan for a moment. I've seen photos and pictures of demining activities where you have folks who are working this area in an area roped off. How do you train these people? This is a very dangerous job.
Yes,
a very dangerous job, and one you cannot just pull somebody in off the street and put them with a mine detector or something. No. How do you train them and work with them? And, and then
we mentor them. Yeah,
you mentor them.
Yeah,
yes.
It's really whether we operate in a peace operation, as we said, the UN peacekeeping, or peace operation, or in a humanitarian emergency context, we rely upon local capacity. And when it does not exist, we build it. So to build a local capacity, what you do is you go through various stages of training, and at one point, some of the very good trainees are going to become trainers. We have a beautiful example in Colombia where we have women who have become trainers of deminers. So it also, for me, it's very important to give the national staff some skills that can be transformed into, it's vocational skills. It's not just when the demining is complete, then they are doing nothing. And the example of Afghanistan is a good one. In the region of Bamiyan, we have trained women deminers. So we had our first group of women deminers who have been trained in a whole array of skills, demining techniques, obviously, but we are making sure that when the task is complete, these women will be able to contribute to their economy, to the life of their communities. So we do look at young men and women, and we give them demining skills. We also work a lot with risk educators. So risk education is a good activity where the messaging is carried out by people of the community to the community. You would not have foreigners like us try to talk to people. There is more than the language. It's the culture.
Exactly. How do you educate the older older people, such as myself, could understand the problems associated with landmines, but how do you work with the young people, children in particular, perhaps children 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, who really don't realize the gravity of a landmine? Do you have educational materials for them and that type of thing?
It's specifically tailored to boys and girls because they react differently. We have dialects. The material, the prints, the posters, the cartoons, we use the means of communication that are prevalent in a given community. And we use the people whom they will listen to. So this is why it's important, together with UNICEF, for instance, to go through schools, but also we also educate to the risk or to the threat people like construction workers and more women, because the message goes through the community through various means. But it's also always very specific. It is not because we have worked in one Arabic-speaking country that we take that material from Iraq to Syria to Libya. It's different. So this is why also we have this great investment of experts in communication, in talking to kids, in grabbing their attention and making it in a playful way.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guests. We would invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with a PBS or community access television station, or perhaps an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or you just have a computer and a website and you like our shows and you would like to share them, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost as a public service to help us better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today we're taking a look at landmines, and not only just demining, but pulling a landmine out of the ground, but also all the ramifications of it. And my guest today is an expert in this area. My guest today is Ms. Agnès Marcaillou, who is the director of the United Nations Mine Action Service. We were in Afghanistan for a moment. Let's shift to Iraq.
Yes.
What are some of the other activities that are going on in Iraq that perhaps we didn't talk about in Afghanistan? Just to use two specific examples.
Same story. In Iraq, you have an emergency response. I will tell you, to restore life, the return to life of some communities after Daesh has been pushed out and vanquished, the first responders have to address the issue of contamination, and that's en masse, the staff of the UN Mine Action Service. So we go there, we assess the threat, and then we plan together with the authorities in Iraq what's needed and establish the priorities. The priorities are always driven by humanitarian needs. It's going to be people will return to Mosul. Displaced population want to go back home, no matter what the situation is. So what we need to do is assess and work out the planning with our UN colleagues and other stakeholders, I would say, the coalition, the Iraqis, on what needs to be done. So it goes from risk education, educating our own humanitarian and aid workers to start with, educating the population, vast education campaigns where we use every means at our disposal, support of the government, that's essential. We go to the survey and the clearance. So this is where, in the case of formerly occupied zones by Daesh, we need real expertise because the contamination is not a traditional minefield. It is really improvised explosive devices. These are the booby traps that are increasingly sophisticated and that will be prevent the return of anybody home. I'll give you an example. You open the door, you blow up. You open the window, you open the fridge. You pick up the teddy bear. You pick up the Quran on the floor, the garbage can. They know we're coming. They know people will return home. And everything is ready to kill people. So this is where we need specific expertise, specific skills. The military have left, so this is really a humanitarian task, and this is when UNMAS is a humanitarian actor. And in doing so, we build in parallel a local capacity. We are not there forever. Iraq belongs to the Iraqis, and they have to take care of their own fate, just like in England or in France or in Belgium, you have bomb squads. We need to make sure they have that capacity. So these are the activities that we carry out in parallel. This is why it's pretty challenging at times.
Exactly. And while you were describing that, the horrific situation, especially with innocent civilians in particular. Now, some of the military people, they expect this. They don't want it to happen. We never want it to happen, but it does happen, unfortunately. But I was thinking of soldiers, perhaps, who were in Afghanistan, part of the folks who were over there with the NATO operation and what have you. But I was thinking, if they go back to the UK or to the United States, there's a victims assistance network there. There's a social support system, a social safety net. But people in many areas of the world don't have that. Is there something that's being done to help them? I know it's a daunting task. It's a huge task. But do you have a victims assistance program?
Yes, that's really my I would say my crusade, because it's the forgotten side of things. When you want to rebuild a country, you need to use the people. I often say, people like you and me, if God forbid something happens to us and we lose a foot, a leg, an arm, we are still you and me. We can still think, we can still work, we can still do something. So it's also related to the dignity of the human person. And we need to have a healthcare system in place that understands their problem. It's very specific. The psychosocial trauma of a landmine, IED, whatever, victim is different from somebody who gets in a car accident. It's different. And the surgical skills that are needed are different. The hospital care is different. The physiotherapy and the psychotherapy are different. And this is where we also have campaigns to sensitize the host country. But the host country in places like this, they're just emerging from war. I mean, you have places that are completely destroyed. And this is where we need to bring the assistance and the expertise also. So survivors assistance, we say survivors, is very, very important. The psychosocial side of the trauma is something that I thank you for asking the question. It's always forgotten. I will give you an example. In this country, you have young, brave veterans coming back from wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, and we know that they have nightmares at night. They have flashbacks, and it disturbs, if not destroys, their life. They were trained as soldiers. Imagine that woman, constant bombing, and they will go back to school for the first time when they're 12 years old. It's too late. And their attention deficit disorder is, it's human. We need to find a way to help them get back to a normal life, to a normal life. That's essential. And this is not an incurable disease that I'm talking about. The developed world, we have the expertise. This is not all about money. This is really finding a way of sharing what we know with these countries, which have also expertise, because they're learning on the job. They're learning on the job. You have amazing people in Iraq and Afghanistan who have a lot to share about, the assistance you can give to survivors. The role of the United Nations, and I think the Secretary General has been very strong on that, is really the partnerships, the getting together. It's not about us, it's about changing a life for the best.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You mentioned Secretary General. Before we run out of time, let me ask you, did I see something about where the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, started a safe ground program? Is that correct?
The campaign.
Briefly, what is that campaign?
Safe ground, safe home, it's one, to raise the awareness of people to the fact that nothing can really happen efficiently if contamination is not taken care of. So, safe ground, a safe home to return to. Two, it is to raise funds that we would like to channel to the assistance to survivors. The money that is raised does not stay with us. It does not support the United Nations. It supports the communities. And it's also linked to something that is very important for me. the return to normal life is get back clean water to drink and electricity and access and freedom of movement. That's fine. We need a little bit of joy too. And if we could turn minefields into play fields, then we would add that dimension that would make a return to life better. So this is really that campaign that is not just a UN campaign, it's your campaign, it's your campaign. Take it, safe ground, safe home. Nothing can happen well to these people if it's contaminated.
Exactly. And our viewers can go to your website, www.unmas.org, for UN Mine Action Service, to learn more about this program and also to donate, that type of thing. Now, in the last 20 seconds we have, what is the major obstacle or challenge you have as you move forward?
We have two challenges. One is in some contexts, accessibility, access, safety. The other obstacle or something that slows the work down is money. We are not dealing with an amazing disease that nobody can treat. The more money is available, the more teams will be available to educate, to train women and men and boys and girls in the field, to do risk education, to print cartoons, to go on air. It's about partnerships. The more people will know about you, the easier it's going to be. And I am so grateful that you gave me this opportunity to talk about a topic that people don't know.
And hopefully more media will help get the message out, because it is such an important message. But Ms. Agnès Marcaillou, it's a very important job that you're doing, and one that literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people depend upon this. And so we encourage everyone to learn more about it and to commend you for the great work that you're doing. But keep it up, and as we move forward, keep us posted on how it's going. But I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.
The first step, or the second, or the third could be your last. If you are in Afghanistan, Iraq, Nigeria, Somalia, Syria, or Yemen today, you may not even need to take a step. You could just turn on a light or open a cupboard, and that could set off an explosion that could bring down your house and your neighbor's house. Today is the International Day for Mine Awareness and Assistance in Mine Action, and I am helping the United Nations bring attention to the continuing struggle to rid the world of landmines, explosive remnants of war, and improvised explosive devices. Last month was the 20-year anniversary of the entry into force of the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Treaty. So far, 164 states have ratified or acceded to this treaty. 88 countries have destroyed more than 50 million stockpiled anti-personnel landmines. 31 states that had landmines on their territory have cleared them. This is a remarkable achievement that deserves to be celebrated. It was brought about by advocacy fueled by dismay and disgust, from the activists and dreamers, through the work of civil society organizations, the United Nations, academics, international jurists, journalists, and governments. A weapon that was once in widespread use, which was easy and inexpensive to make and deploy, was stymied by collective action. Every landmine not made means potentially that one child's life was not violently taken away or altered forever. The United Nations remains committed to a world free from the threat of mines, explosive remnants of war, and improvised explosive devices. Which is why it has today launched a global campaign, Safe Ground, which promotes the linkage between mine action, sport, and the Sustainable Development Goals. Safe Ground turns minefields into playing fields, to foster communities and to raise awareness about victims and survivors of armed conflict. I call on everyone to take stock of the fact that regardless of the task we face, like when tackling the scourge of anti-personnel landmines 20 years ago, by taking collective action through argument and advocacy, changing minds and attitudes, and through painstaking and tenacious work, we can make this world a better place.
Safety fish ورق رفتم پیش زدگان باز انتحارش چی افتادم باز در چشم خواست کردم در شبخانه بودم چی گوش موگار شد سینه موگار شد پای موگار شد
گوش مشکل داره گوش حالم خیلی صدا میده دیگه دردم داره سینه نام درد داره پای نام درد داره 2-3 پرزه به پای نام مانده خیلی سر اعصابش بد تاثیر مونه صدای جیغ میزنه گریان میکنه که مادر چی درسای خوانده نمیتونم سرم درد میگیره گوشم درد میگیره دکترها گفتن که عملیات میکنم دیگه وقت اقتصادی ما کم بود پولم نداشتیم دیگه مشکل دارم 2 تا دختر دیگه هم دارم 1 پسرم دارم 4 تا اولاد دارم خودم سرپرست اینا هستم
کوچه حالی زیاد نمارم در خونه هستم چیزایی دیگه بازی کنم با بچه ها برم هر جای تو بازی میکرد باری نمونم
دیگه حالا میخوایم که امنیت باشه به افغانستان همه مردم راحت باشن خوش باشن همین جگرخونی همه کم باشن تنها از ما نه از همه مردم ما از همه دوستا
The first time I went into Mosul, I was driving through East Mosul, and then as we crossed the bridge into West Mosul, it took my breath away. The amount of devastation. I've visited many post-conflict environments, ranging from Afghanistan into the Balkans, throughout Africa, and I don't think I've ever seen a part of a city that was so pulverized. It was very reminiscent of images of the Second World War, of Stalingrad, of Hamburg, Coventry, completely blown apart. Mosul is a city in northern Iraq. It lies between Erbil and the Syrian border. And when ISIS was at the peak of its control, there were over 2 million people living in Mosul. It was the biggest city under ISIS control. As the city was surrounded, they fell back into defensive positions. They'd had 2 years to prepare these, and the majority of these were in the old city, so West Mosul, on the banks of the river. And these buildings had been booby-trapped, they'd been rigged with explosives, they had caches of ammunition and weapons for the fighters to use. The fighters were wearing suicide vests and prepared to fight to the end. and the coalition forces dropped a lot of ordnance on them. And so the explosive hazard and the explosive contamination in Mosul is unlike really anything I've seen before. So you would have buildings were collapsed in on bodies. Some of the buildings had been booby-trapped or rigged with explosives to stop people returning home. And then there was the unexploded ordnance from just the actual fighting. When you look at that level of devastation, you know, people just can't get back to their homes. They're finding it very difficult. You know, the fridge might have been booby-trapped, so if you open the fridge door, it goes off, or a light switch gets flicked and there's a bomb waiting for you. On top of the different explosive hazards, a lot of the buildings are very unstable. So, you know, if when the teams are clearing, they were to move the wrong piece of rubble, the whole building could collapse on them. So it's just a really difficult and challenging environment. So people will continue to not be able to return to their homes or rebuild their homes until the explosive hazard has been cleared. The actual searchers, the guys who are doing a lot of the grunt work, who are on the ground on their hands and knees, they're Iraqis. They're the real unsung heroes. You know, going out and finding out where items are. Often items are brought in by people who found them in their homes or found them in their gardens, and they bring them to our team sites, and then our teams work to destroy these items. But also then looking at some of the new technology like drones and being able to, you know, put a drone over a site and look to see what the potential hazard is, and seeing things from different perspectives and looking at, are there obvious threats? You know, can we see an explosive device that is visible? Can we see indicators that an explosive device might have been laid? Can we look at different avenues of approach and to be able to see where we can provide the most benefit? And if you want people to go home, you have to create an environment that they feel safe. And that's not just their home being removed of explosive hazards, but it's allowing them to have access to clean water, to electricity, for the schools to be cleared so that their children can go back to school, so that health posts can be cleared so they can be refurbished, so that hospitals are safe, so that, you know, doctors can start having, you know, procedures and surgery. And a lot of the work we've been doing has been working to ensure that we prioritise the tasking we do that has the most impact. So if we clear a water treatment plant that's going to provide 250,000 people a day with clean water, or we clear a bridge so it can be repaired and 1,000 vehicles an hour can cross it, you know, what will give the most impact? What will give us real value add to the work we do? And it's incredible when I was in Mosul to see how quickly families would go back into the rubble of West Mosul and relay their foundations and start building their homes again. I mean, it's really incredible to see how proud they are and how they want to get on with their lives. You know, they've gone through a terrible conflict, and they're showing a resilience that is very inspirational. And we can help them by removing explosive hazards.
Owns them for benefits the community. They want to like small, very small plane them with the fly, but they're not supposed to sit down inside.
I have the pleasure to formally launch this national drone corridor.
We see drones playing a role in supplying oxytocin and other medical supplies to pregnant women who are about to deliver, to really sick people who are in inaccessible places. We also see drones playing a place in search and rescue when there are environmental disasters. So there are a few good humanitarian benefits that we envision for this corridor as well. And the fact that it aligns with UNICEF's goal, it makes it all the more worthwhile when you have to work with other people whose goals are aligned with yours.
Welcome to Global 3000.
Upcycling in Delhi, we learn about an initiative that's creating much-needed employment opportunities and clearing up the city. In our new series, Workplaces, we find out just how much potential disused ships still have to offer. And we head to a pioneering restaurant in Marrakesh, where women are being helped to earn a living and lead self-determined lives. Caring for children, looking after sick relatives, doing the housework. Such tasks are still overwhelmingly the domain of women and girls. According to the non-profit group Oxfam, every day around 12 billion hours of such work are undertaken worldwide, all of it unpaid. Men, on the other hand, are commonly paid for the work they do. In Germany, 72% of women have paid employment. The EU average is 67%, while in Morocco that figure is just 21%. The country's strong patriarchal traditions make it hard for women to achieve financial independence. Hard, though not impossible.
When Fatim Zahra makes tea in the morning, her mother and sisters are still asleep. She's the only one who has to leave early, because she's the only one who has work. Her father died when she was very young. Families without any males in the household often face an uphill struggle in Morocco. When her mother ran out of money, Fatim Zahra had to leave school.
If you don't have a father, or at least brothers, people say, what does she expect to achieve in life? It's over for her. But I can't settling for that. I'm going to make something of my life.
Fatim Zahra's journey to work takes an hour and a half, but she doesn't mind. This job is her big opportunity because it includes training. At the women's restaurant Amal, the day begins with prayers for the trainees and their cooking instructors. It's a moment of quiet before the work begins. Today, it's Fatim Zahra's to bake bread. The others get to work peeling vegetables and cutting up meat. The trainees include single mothers, widows, and former house servants, women who have very little standing in Moroccan society. This instructor is divorced, something which carries a strong social stigma, but that no longer bothers her.